Hello, and welcome to General Conference Conversations, a podcast where we have conversations about General Conference. I am your host, Kaylin, and I am extraordinarily late with starting this season. I guess late in the way I had originally planned. Plans have changed. If you've been around for a while, following this podcast for a while, you'll probably notice that I started quite a few months later than I normally do for a new season. For the first 3 seasons, I started about a month and a half after General Conference, so like April conference, I was starting episodes in like May, beginning of May and middle of May. It gave me a month and a half to kind of read the talks, reread stuff, get stuff prepared, like posts, and plan everything out, and a little bit of breathing room also between seasons for me. And then I would end a couple weeks, 2 to 3 weeks before the next conference started. So again, if I was going up to an April conference, I would end episodes halfway through March. That obviously did not happen this time. And if you've been around, if you've been following me for a while, last season, the end of last season was also kind of wonky and weird, because I started a new job last summer, about June, July-ish. I started a new job, and it has been insane, and not at all how I expected it to be, and very busy, and so I figured I'll tell you a little bit about it in a second, but it's just been very crazy. And so I went back and forth on whether I was even going to continue this podcast, just because I've been so crazy busy and I have so many other commitments and other things going on in my life. But I really do love doing this, even though it does take up time and energy. I really do love doing this, and so I'm going to continue for now. We will see how I'm doing in a few months. So recap of my job at the moment, to give you some context. My husband has been working for this company for about 2 years now, year and a half, and it's a construction company. We work in construction, and the company, it's a general contractor, so they do a bunch of different things. So I've worked on a few different projects, but they do the renovations for the temples in Canada. And so I've had the opportunity to work on, this is my second temple now. My husband's done 4 or 5, I believe, in the last year and a half. And so, which means we also travel a lot, which I think I mentioned in November, was, as you can see with your eyeballs right now, if you're on YouTube, this is going to primarily be an audio project from now on, instead of videos with my face on them. I will still be putting videos up on YouTube, but it will just be hearing my voice. And because part of that is because we've been traveling back and forth from our home in Alberta to other places. So Montreal, right now we're in Toronto for a few months, working on the temple here. And so it's hard to have like a consistent setup where I can film, and also kind of the privacy to film. We're often living with other workers, other coworkers, or other employees, and so it's harder to kind of find that space and the time to actually film episodes. So is going to be audio at the moment. So, and at the moment, like I said, we're in Toronto right now, and this is a bigger project. We have a bigger role in this project than in the past. And so I'm working longer hours, more hours. And so again, just have that a little bit of extra time to not totally worry about setting up and taking down. And we have a house rental right now, and our other employees, like I said, come and live with us when they're out here for their working on their part of the project. And so it's just crazy. It's crazy. So I am hoping that I can stay on top of this, and I always have a burst of energy with the new year. So I'm trying to hit the ground running. I'll be doing more episodes during the week to fit in all of the talks before April conference, which now is only 3 months away, which is crazy. So I'll be doing 3 episodes a week instead of just 2. And as I said, it will just be an audio format at the moment. But I'm very excited to jump in with you guys, and I'm grateful for you for sticking around and still enjoying this with me. I hope you enjoy it anyway. And I'm excited to jump into this conference. This was, again, a weird conference for me. I was traveling on conference weekend. We were flying out to Montreal on Saturday, and so we missed the first 2 sessions completely. Like we were flying, and so I wasn't able to watch them live like I normally do. And I mean, Saturdays are always kind of funky, right? With the conference, sometimes you have the whole weekend and you can watch all of the sessions, and sometimes you have things going on Saturday. But it was the first time in quite a few conferences that I hadn't been able to watch all of the sessions on Saturday. And so in quote-unquote rereading these talks, I've just been reading them because I hadn't listened to them. So today, of course, we are starting in the very first one, a Saturday morning session with Elder Bednar's talk, In the Path of Their Duty. And honestly, this talk, I tried to read it 3 or 4 times and I just got lost. Not because it was Elder Bednar's fault, but I had my mind in other places. And so when I finally sat down and like really dug into it, I really enjoyed it. He's talking about pioneers, of course, and he's talking about back up a little bit. Sorry. I'm trying to get into the swing of things, so if I mess up something. Of course, as always, I encourage you to read and or listen to this talk before you come listen to me talk about it, so you can get your own takes and your own spiritual inspiration and your own questions to have answered. And then you can come and hopefully get some answers or more questions, most likely, from my thoughts and feelings about this particular talk. So of course, this is called In the Path of Their Duty, and his first section is called They Are the Last Wagon, and he's talking about the pioneers arriving in the Salt Lake Valley in 1947. And particularly the 100th anniversary 1847. Did I say 1947? I was looking at 1847. But he's talking about the 100th anniversary in 1947. There was a lot of celebrations and, of course, statues and a bunch of things, right? Celebrations of the saints coming to Salt Lake Valley is a big deal. Is a big deal in our history. And he talks about a talk, I don't know if it was like a speech or something at a celebration called Day of the Last Wagon by President J. Reuben Clark, who was the first counselor in the first presidency at the time. And he talks about many of the, very well-known leaders who were there, like Brigham Young and probably B. Pratt, Heber C. Kimball, Wilford Woodruff, and then also, but he said, his primary purpose was to talk about the people who we don't know their names. We don't have them officially recorded, and he called them They of the Last Wagon. And so that's kind of where he kind of structures his talk on, right, is the people who, like us, the people in the church right now who, aren't getting ensign article write-ups about our amazing charity dinner we did for the young women, or we're not being mentioned in general conference, right? We're not being written about in the saints volumes, but we are continuing on our way. We are doing amazing things, but we're not famous, right? And as a way to another way to talk about that, he talks about a talk by President Howard W. Hunter, who talks about Moroni and Helaman. In Alma 48, there's the famous verse, if all men had been and were and ever would be like unto Moroni, all the powers of hell would be shaken forever, right? This great testament to this great man. And then a few verses later, it talks about Helaman and his brethren. And they said, saying they were no less serviceable unto the people than was Moroni. And that even though, so he goes on to say, even though Helaman and his brethren weren't as noticeable or conspicuous or famous as Moroni, they were no less helpful or useful as Moroni was. And I remember that being pointed out to me as a missionary, and it helped with a lot of the kind of intruder syndrome. What's that called? Is that what it's called? Imposter syndrome is very close. Imposter syndrome, when you feel like, you're not really supposed to be there. Are you actually good enough to be there? And to kind of remember that even in the scriptures it says that, Helaman and his brethren were no less serviceable than Moroni, who 2 verses before had been like, if every man and every woman were like Moroni, the powers of hell would shake. And then to be like, and also Helaman and his brothers, same thing, right? It's kind of like ditto, ditto to Moroni. And so as I said, as a missionary, and very many times, wow, my English is really struggling today. Throughout my mission, throughout other callings that I've had, particularly as the women's secretary at the moment, and also just in other areas of my life, particularly in my job at the moment, I often don't feel like I'm making a difference, or that I'm doing anything, or that somebody else would be doing my job way better than I would. Or I feel like I'm doing a lot and I'm not being acknowledged for it, right? I feel like I'm doing so much. I feel like I'm working 12-hour days and still getting, criticized, or just keep adding things to my to-do list that never goes down. I feel like I'm doing everything wrong, even though I feel like I'm trying my best. And I think it's so nice to be reminded that we are making a difference, that even if we don't feel like it, we are no less serviceable. We are doing things that impact people. Even though we're not famous like Moroni, we are diligent and useful like Helaman and his brethren. This is my 2 questions, kind of for the whole talk as we talk about this. In what ways do you feel unacknowledged or like you're not making a difference? And how can you acknowledge others' contributions at work, school, or church, or in other areas of your life? We all strive for recognition, right? It's nice to be recognized. It's nice to be acknowledged and for our effort to be seen and heard and, be thanked for it. And so how can we do that for others? So along those lines, I think it's a very human desire to want to be seen, to want to make a difference. And he shares a quote from President Hunter about being famous. He says, most of the best people who ever lived weren't very famous either. And I think, especially in this day and age, I always feel very old when I say that, but in this time of social media and social media influencers and YouTubers and basically anybody can be famous, right? They have the potential to be famous. They have more potential to be famous or at least well-known, known by a vast majority, or not vast majority of people, but a vast array of people than somebody pre-internet, right? Even just in your personal life, in your personal online interactions, you're able to keep in touch with more people, and as I said, you have the potential to be famous, to be known by a lot of people, to become an influencer or a YouTube superstar or whatever. And so we have this thought in our brains of, well, they're famous, why aren't I? Or am I not doing things well enough? Or am I not good enough? And it's really easy to compare ourselves to everybody else and to think that, we're not making a difference because we're not YouTube famous. We're not good enough because we're not the, best of the best, or making money off of Instagram or whatever, right? I was watching a new show. It was very random. It's called 24 Hours in A&E, which is A&E, if you don't know, is the ERs, the emergency departments in England, accidents and emergencies, A&E. And I found this show very randomly, and it's a docuseries, whatever, showing what it's like to work in the A&E in England at this very busy emergency department in London. And I think it's fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating. Anyway, it's very random, but it's absolutely fascinating. And they had this guy who'd come in. He had gotten angry and punched through a glass door, and his hand was cut really bad. And they show him just kind of waiting. Of course, you wait a lot in the emergency room. And his mom asked him, what do you want to be when you grow up? And he said, a legend. He's like 17. And his mom's like, no, be serious. Like, what do you actually want to be? He's like, no, a legend. I want to be known. I want to, make a difference. I want people to know me. I want to be famous. And of course she's like, well, there's a lot of ways to do that. And what do you actually want to do? And it was supposed to be just kind of this one-off thing, right? And it came up as I was thinking about this talk today. And it made me think of also The Fault in Our Stars book young adult book that came out years ago. It's very famous, turned into a movie. The guy, the love interest in that movie says, or in that book and movie, says something along the same lines, like, I want to make a difference. I want people to know me. I want to make a mark on this world. And of course, he's coming also from the perspective of a cancer patient who has had to think of that, you know, if I died tomorrow, what impact would I have left on the world? What would I regret? And his girlfriend, the main character at the time, she says, well, you've made a mark on me. You've made a mark on the people around you. Isn't that enough? And she gets kind of very frustrated with him, which is fair. And I think this talk was a good reminder for me, and could be a good reminder for others, that just because you're not famous, or just because you never have a super influential calling, or you're never a CEO, or you're never a millionaire, or whatever, right? You're still making a difference in people's lives. You're still impacting your family, your friends, your coworkers, and you'll never quite know how much impact you have on people, but you are impacting people. I think that's really important to remember. He also has kind of a third way that he describes these people, the people that they've been talking about, right? The unacknowledged, the last of the wagon, they of the last wagon, the no less serviceable people. He talks about, he quotes another part of the Book of Mormon, where Samuel the Lamanite talks about they that are in the path of their duty. He talks about diligence and kind of the people who are just going about their lives, right? Day to day, just trying to survive. And I think sometimes, kind of going off what I was just saying, it can be hard to accept that, like, life is not a movie, it's not a TV show, it's kind of a slog sometimes, right? It's not, okay, that trial has wrapped up and now I get a break and then the next one comes. There's trials on trials with joy and sadness and grief mixed in, and the diligence, the keep goingness, the you have to live your life. It's not some big, massive reveal at the end of every year, right? It can feel like that sometimes, you know, obviously you have periods of your life that you can mark very distinctly, like my mission obviously started on April 3rd, 2019 and finished on October 20th, 2020. And that's a, you know, period of my life that is very defined, like marked very, very definitely. And I have, you know, high school is marked very definitely, and college is marked very definitely, right? But there are other things that go on in your life that you can't mark that definitely. Relationships and spiritual growth, and you might have milestones or big events, but they just keep going. They don't begin and end. There's not always a beginning, middle, and end to our lives, right? At least as we're going. Obviously our lives are going to end, duh, but like, you know what I mean. But to know, like, other people are also experiencing this, right? Other people are just going about their day, doing their best. You know, there are people who are making wards and stakes run smoothly. There are people who are working at McDonald's and making the food that you go in and eat. There are people who are, running your Walmart for you, or making sure your street lights work or your stoplights work. There are people who, like me, are construction workers who are building or renovating places around you. And they're just getting on day to day. And sometimes they are living just day to day. And that's enough, right? It can be really, I don't know, there's something, it sounds really depressing when I say it out loud like that, of like, it's just, you live day to day. And yet it felt very empowering to me, of just this like, yep, we're just trucking along. It's okay if you don't have extraordinary things happen in your life. You're going to have extraordinary things happen in your life. But it's okay if, like, right now you're not having extraordinary things happen in your life. That right now you're living day to day. And that has felt like my life the last month or so. We got to Toronto at the beginning of December. And like I said, it's a new role for me. And for my husband in the company, in a project. We are learning a lot. We've been thrown into the deep end a lot in a lot of things. And it's new, and in some ways it's very exciting. In some ways it's very anxiety inducing. In other ways it's very frustrating. I mean, I'm working with people, and people are frustrating. People are imperfect. And I'm working in a new place with new people, and I'm also like working on the temple, and that's really exciting. But I have very much worked day to day. What do I need to do today to get to tomorrow? And then what do I need to do tomorrow to get to the next day? And, what do I absolutely need to get done today before my energy runs out and I have to go to sleep? And I'm hoping that was mostly because it was the beginning of the project and we were getting everything situated and learning stuff. But I have a feeling it's going to continue, because sometimes that's just how construction is, and it's crazy and things change and they find stuff that set us back. And I've had to learn to live day to day and not make plans too far out, which is really hard for me. And to, have control where I have control. I can control the things that I have in my court. I can get done what I can and explain the things that I can't get done. And so it was kind of, hopeful for me to read this and be like, sometimes you're just living day to day. Most of the time you're just living day to day. And you're diligent and you just keep pushing through, and you find pockets of absolute joy. And you find pockets of absolute grief and sadness and frustration and anger and anxiety. And you just keep going, because one day you'll find the joy again. Or something small will happen during the day that makes you feel accomplished, and that makes it all worth it. Anyway, the last, third of his talk, maybe more, is him explaining this phrase in the path of their duty. And I highly encourage you to read these last few paragraphs. I was reading this and I went to highlight them all, because I was like, man, these are so good. I have to read them as one of my quotes when I record my episode. And I realized that it's 9 paragraphs. And I was like, maybe not. I'm not going to read half the talk on my episode. So it's the section called In the Path of Their Duty, and he has several paragraphs called In the Path of Their Duty Describes, right? And he talks about people who look for and sit next to people who are alone in church meetings, comfort those standing in need of comfort, caretakers, or people who support leadership positions, people who have fallen away from God and are turning back to Him. People who are striving to make covenants with God and can't because of things that are out of their control, right? He just lists so many people, so many instances and situations that I feel like we can all, even if we've not been in that specific circumstance, right, we can sympathize with, we can empathize with, we've been in a similar situation. And as we were talking about earlier, it feels like a slog. It feels like we're not being acknowledged. It feels like we're doing everything and we're still not getting praise or whatever. And I think sometimes we have to be okay with not getting praise, which is hard. And also, as my other question was like, how can we praise others for what they do for us? And I think is, whatever you want to call it, karma, good things you send up, what do they call it? Oh my goodness, it comes around. What goes around comes around. That's the phrase I'm looking for. What goes around comes around. That as we put praise out into the world, we are going to get praise or acknowledgement back. And I'm not saying that like we should expect to be praised or that we need to be praised, but that we will have our accomplishments and our kindness acknowledged, and we will see how we are impacting other people. And it's amazing. I love people. I love people. I love my Heavenly Father. I love Jesus. Amen. He also has a promise and testimony at the end of his talk, that, we will be rewarded for the diligence that we're putting into our lives, the kindness that we're showing other people, and that one day we will see how we impacted others, how we are how we have, changed people's lives around us. And I really believe that. I really believe that one day we will know how we have impacted the people around us and to see how they've impacted us. Sometimes we don't realize until years later. Sometimes we never realize just how much a person has impacted our lives. So to reiterate my questions, or to repeat my questions. In what ways do you feel unacknowledged or like you're not making a difference? And on top of that, how are you making a difference? Like you can see that and you can ponder on that. Especially now, obviously, with the new year. Happy New Year, also. To look back on your year, and it's a good reflecting point, even if you're not a fan of New Year's resolutions or not a fan of goals, to reflect on the year. It's just a good stopping point, right? It's a good reflection point, a good checkpoint to kind of look back and see what you've done this year, where you're at. I talk about goals a lot, and one of my favorite stories from my mission was there was this hike in my mission called Flatiron, and it's like a 5-mile hike up a mountain and back down, and it's steep. It's like bouldering. Parts of it are like bouldering. Like it's a hard hike. It's like 8 hours, 9-hour hike. And I did it a couple of times as a missionary. I absolutely loved it, which is really kind of funny because I'm not an exerciser. I like exercising. I like playing volleyball. I like being athletic and playing sports. And I like hiking. I really love hiking, but it's not like I'm an extreme hiker or anything. And it was really, really hard. And it was really frustrating because looking up the mountain, you can kind of see where you're supposed to end. You can see Flatiron Peak, but it doesn't ever look like it gets closer. And sometimes it looks like it's getting farther away. And you're like, man, I've been hiking for hours and it does not look like I've gotten any closer. And then I would take a couple of minutes, stop, get water, eat a granola bar, whatever, and you could turn around and you'd be like, wow, look how far I've come. I think sometimes that's easier to, rather than looking at how far away our goal is, looking at how far we've come from our starting point, and have really good self-reflection. I don't know how that really relates with everything. I hope that makes sense that I brought that up, but like looking at your year and seeing where you were January of 2023 to where you are now, January of 2024, and what you've accomplished and what you've gone through, those moments of joy, those moments of sadness, just reflect and process, right? And go into a new year maybe with goals or continuing goals that you've been working on for a long time. And I think that will help us see that we are going day to day, we are pushing through, we are doing the things that we need to do. And I think that's really important. And then of course, second question is, how can you acknowledge others' contributions at work, school, church, or in other areas of your life? And I think that's that, you see it in yourself, or you've something that you need, you can give to others, or, seeing that you are making a difference helps you to see how others are making a difference and help them see it themselves, right? And as always, please check out the footnotes for any further reading. He has, a few talks that he references in here. He has a few scriptures that a lot of scriptures that he references in here. A lot of them are from the Book of Mormon, which is exciting because that's Come Follow Me this year, of course. So definitely check those out if there are specific topics, especially you want to continue to think about questions. And of course, add your own questions. Come up with your own questions, your own things that you want to work on, or things that spoke to you and that you want to implement in your life. And I will see you guys next time in just a couple of days with Sister Wright's talk, Abide the Day in Christ. And I'll see y'all then.